Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another Make a Card My Day video. Before we get into the video too far, I have to apologize. I am suffering from a little bit of a cold, so you'll probably hear it over the next few videos. Today I'm going to be making 4 cards using stripes as well as this set of products from Simon Says Stamp. This is the Healing Hugs stamp set and the coordinating die set. So I'm going to be showing you 4 different cards, like I said. And this first one, I'm going to walk you through how to create this really fun stripe background using Distress Oxide inks and ink blending. I'm going to do quite a bit of masking on this using some Post-it tape. This is 2-inch wide Post-it tape, and I've really explored different ways of ink blending stripes over the last little bit, and I think this is the best solution that I've come across, which is using this really wide masking tape, and you're going to have different masking tapes for each color so that you're never sharing the same edge with multiple colors. And I say that because you'll notice here at the beginning, I am going to share the same masking strip with multiple colors, and I'll tell you why you don't want to do it here in a minute. I started out with Picked Raspberry, and I had a nice clean edge when I removed that Post-it tape. Now I'm going to move it to the top of that Picked Raspberry area, and I'm using the same exact piece of tape that I did before. Now for this second stripe, which is going to be Ripe Persimmon, I didn't have much of a problem. The color didn't really show too much. If a little bit of that Picked Raspberry that was left on the Post-it tape, if it kind of bled into the orange, I didn't really notice. However, when I moved on to this third color, which is Mustard Seed, I did have a little bit of that Ripe Persimmon blend into the Mustard Seed stripe. And this is when I realized or decided that it would be best to have a dedicated Post-it tape matte like edge for each color. So in the end, I think I ended up with about, I think it was 6 different postage tape edges. You can do this without using Post-it tape. You could use masking paper and cut it into wide strips. You just want to make sure you have the strips wide enough so that you can use both sides and that your blending tool won't go past that tape and, add color to the other side of that masking tape. So I'm going to speed up the video here so you can see all these colors going along. I also use peacock feathers and seedless preserves, and I kept these in a rainbow order. For some reason, when I see sort of rainbow colors, if they're not in rainbow order, my mind is like, oh, I want to fix that. So I just went ahead and did rainbow order from the start here. And I ended up with, I believe I have an orange, which is the Ripe Persimmon color. That's the last color to finish off the other corner. So each color was shown twice. There were a couple colors that were shown 3 times. So here is my striped background. I'm actually going to set this aside for a bit and let it dry while I work on the next card. This next one has stripes made with watercolors, and I did experiment doing stripes a couple different ways, and this is the way that I found worked the best. Starting out with some cold pressed watercolor paper from Fabriano, I'm removing it from the block with a bone folder that just takes off that gummy edge. And then I took a ruler, this is a T-square ruler, and a pencil, and I drew on some diagonal stripes going across this watercolor paper. Now this watercolor paper is 5x7. I will cut it down eventually. After I had all of my stripes penciled on, I taped my watercolor paper to a hardboard. This is going to help keep it flat while I'm painting and while it dries. I'm using some Gansai Tambi watercolors, and I'm going to paint this in a specific order. Like I said before, I like to keep things in rainbow order, so I'm going to start with red. This is just a nice red shade that's at the top of the palette, and I'm using a 1-inch wide flat brush from Royal & Langnickel. This is from their Zen line, but you could definitely do this painting with any other type of brush. I just find using a flat edge brush like this makes it a little bit easier to get a nice flat stripe. It's just a little bit easier. I did rotate the board so that I could paint both edges, and I could see where that pencil line was a little bit better when the pencil line was nearest me. So I'm going to skip the orange, which would be the next color coming down, and I'm going to go to yellow. And I skipped orange because that red stripe is still drying. If I was to try to paint the orange directly next to that red, the colors would bleed into each other, and I don't want that to happen. I want these stripes to be nice and crisp and look really, really neat. After those 3 colors were dried, I then came in and painted in the other colors in between, the orange, the green, and also the purple. So this really bold rainbow stripe was a great way to have stripes on some watercolor paper, and it worked out really, really well. It wasn't too complicated, and I was able to paint this really quickly. I'm going to remove that post-it tape, the masking tape, and then I took some A7 layers dies from Waffle Flower, and I'm going to cut this down to be a little bit smaller than 5x7. So I ran that through my die cutting machine, and now I'm going to set that watercolor piece aside while I work on the 3rd striped card. On this one, I'm going to be doing some stamping, and I'm going to do the stamping with Simon Says Stamp inks and also a stamp set from Simon. This is the Jumbo Stripes stamp set, and I'm going to use the 2nd largest stripe. I'm going to use 4 different colors of Simon inks. I'm using Hot Mama, Teeny Bikini, Jelly Bean, and Teal. So I'm going to use my Misty stamp positioning tool for this, as well as the Misty Creative Corners. So I have that creative corner in that bottom left corner, put my paper in, and then I'm going to position that wide stripe near the bottom of the cardstock. I'm going to place that down, close my Misty so it transfers the stamp, and then I'm going to take that creative corner and reposition my cardstock. This is going to make sure that I have that stamp in the exact position where I want it. After I had that positioned over on the side by the creative corner, I removed the Misty creative corner, and then I could ink up my stamp. Like I said before, I'm using Hot Mama ink, and I'm going to ink this up. And for Hot Mama, which was the first stripe color, I only stamped it once. But for the rest of the stripes, I've got 3 more colors. I did end up stamping the stripe twice, mostly because of how this Hot Mama turned out. Now, these inks from Simon do dry back and kind of fill in and flatten out. They kind of blend out, so some of the texture goes away. But my Hot Mama ink pad, I think, is going a little bit dry, so I did have some splotchiness that didn't go away. The next color, Teeny Bikini, looks really cute right there. Once again, I stamped that twice. The 3rd color is actually Jelly Bean, and I wanted to show you how I cleaned this stripe, because you notice I've got my baby wipe, I've wiped it off quite a bit. Then I come in with a stamp chamois, and I think that stamp is really, really clean. And then I come in with some Ultra Clean Stamp Cleaner from Simon. I'm going to wipe that on and then use my baby wipe and wipe again. And look how much ink comes off that. These stamps, which are very high quality, really absorb a lot of ink color, so they will stain. And because of that, you might not realize that that ink is still on the stamp. So when you're using the same stamp image like I am today, this really wide stripe, you're going to want to make sure you clean in between colors extremely well. All right, so I've got my 4 stripes. Now I'm going to use the A2 layers dies from Waffle Flower, and I'm going to cut this down to be a very small rectangle. Using some micro pour tape to hold that die to my paper while I run it through my Gemini Junior die cutting machine. And then I realized, like I said before, that Hot Mama left some kind of splotchiness. So I did grab an ink blending tool, and I used a little bit of masking tape to mask that off. Okay, moving on to the 4th example of how to create stripes. I'm going to do some paper piecing, and I'm going to use these really great colors from the Stamp Market in their Color Crush Solids pack. Has some really great pattern papers in here, just a couple patterns. The rest are solids, and I love this color palette, and I especially like the example of those stripes on this little insert inside the paper package. So I'm going to cut down each one of these colors to 1/2 inch wide strips, and I'm going to cut out about 3 of each color, and then I can start putting them on my paper. I've got some 5x7 cardstock here, and I'm coating the entire cardstock with tape runner adhesive. This is a Mega Runner adhesive from Xyron, and I'm coating the entire area because I am planning to die cut the stripes so that they are diagonal, and I want to make sure that every single bit of this pattern paper is adhered to the white cardstock underneath. So I went through and I used the same order of colors that are on the pattern paper package insert, just because I thought they looked great together, and why not? So after I had all of these stripes placed on here, then I grabbed that same die set that I used earlier, which is the A7 layers dies, and I grabbed a much smaller rectangle and I put it onto this pattern paper at a diagonal. I'm going to use some micro pour tape just to hold this down while I die cut it, and then I ran it through my Gemini Junior die cutting machine. And I'm left with this really great rectangle that's perfectly sized for an A7 card. Okay, let's go back to that first stripe example. I'm going to show you the stamping on this particular card. So I have the stripes here. I'm going to be embossing right on top of the stripes. So I want to test this out and make sure that the Distress Oxide ink is completely dry. I don't want my embossing powder to stick to areas where I haven't stamped. Looks like it passed the test. Everything looks great. So I'm going to move on to the stamping. Now I want to show you the stamp set once again and point out that the really large Sending Healing Hugs and the large Get Well Soon are two greetings that I specifically designed to go inside that floral frame. Yes, this is a stamp set that I designed, and I wanted to show you exactly what I was envisioning when I was designing this stamp set. So I'm going to create a template for me to use so I can get my stamping just perfect on my card. I have some vellum. I'm stamping it in some black ink. This is Onyx Black ink from VersaFine. And then I'm going to coat it with some clear embossing powder from Ranger. Now, what you're using to make this template is not important. You just want to make sure that you have a template that's made out of, that has like a dark line so you can really see it, and probably on something like vellum so you can see your project underneath. So now I'm going to take this template and place it over the top of my background piece. I'm going to place that there, and then I'm going to take my Get Well Soon and position that just perfectly nestled inside that floral frame. And I'm getting it on there. Then I can move the vellum piece around a little bit and make sure that the Get Well Soon words are perfectly straight on my card. And then transfer that stamp to my stamp door, my MISTI stamp door, and then I can do all of my stamping. I'm prepping that area with an anti-static powder tool. Like I said before, I will be heat embossing. And then I'm using Versamark ink to stamp this large Get Well Soon greeting. And that's going to be perfectly positioned so that I can later stamp that floral frame around it. So I'm going to sprinkle on some white embossing powder. This is Alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. I'll hit that with a heat tool until it's smooth and melted. And now I'm going to take that floral frame, my template, place that over the top, make sure I get it positioned just right. I'm going to hold that down with that magnet, just the corner of it. And then I'm going to grab the actual stamp and place that over the top. I'm going to position it, get it right in the same position. And then I can close my MISTI door and transfer the stamp to the door of my MISTI, and I'll be ready for stamping. Okay, so I'm going to do the same exact thing that I did before. I'm prepping that area with an anti-static powder tool and then using Versamark ink on the stamp. Press that down and walk my fingertips over each area of that stamp, and then I can apply some embossing powder. I'm going to sprinkle the embossing powder on, and then I can use a heat tool to smooth and melt all of that powder. So this card is practically done. The only thing I have left to do is actually put it on the card base. So I used that Xyron Mega Runner that I used earlier, put adhesive on the back, and then directly onto a white card base made out of some Neenah Solar White 110-pound cardstock. And that finishes the very first card. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to be working on the second card that was made using watercolor stripes. And you'll notice this card got cut down eventually, and I'll tell you why. So instead of stamping directly on that watercolor piece, I decided to stamp on some vellum and use some gold embossing powder. And this really shows why you want to have that template, because this Sending Healing Hugs greeting is very crooked on this vellum piece. So it's kind of hard to stamp the frame by itself or the words by itself without knowing exactly where the other will be. So having a template like the one I created earlier is great. In this case, I'm stamping on some vellum, which is going to be on top, so I didn't need to worry about the exact positioning. So that embossing powder I used was Gilded from Bruce Monroe. And then I wanted to create 2 layers of vellum. So I ran this embossed piece through a Xyron Creative sticker machine. This is actually the, I think it's called the Creative, oh gosh, I can't remember. Creative Station, that's what it's called. And it puts adhesive all on the back of the vellum. And then I press that down onto another piece of vellum. So I have 2 layers of vellum now, so it'll really stand out on top of that busy watercolor background. Then I trimmed it down to be a little smaller just so it was easier to work with. And then I used that outline die from the die set, the coordinating die set, and I'm going to die cut this complete shape out of both layers of vellum. Use some more micro pour tape to hold that in place, and then I ran it through my die cutting machine, through a Gemini Junior machine, and I'm left with this really beautiful, intricately die cut piece with that grating in the center. I really love how that turned out. So now I have a 5x7 card base, and I'm going to put some foam tape on the back of my watercolor piece, and then place that directly onto the front of this card. I'm then going to take that vellum piece that I created earlier. I'm going to place it on top, just kind of figure out exactly where I want it. And then I'm going to take the vellum piece and put it through that Creative Station light once again. It's like it did before. It's going to add adhesive on the entire surface on the back. And this is going to make it so I can adhere this vellum piece without lots of adhesive showing. I'm using my fingers to really press that adhesive onto the vellum piece. And then I can peel back this area and then peel up my vellum piece. And it's like it creates it into a big, huge sticker. I'm going to stick that on top of my watercolor panel right there. And then I decided that it kind of looked, just the spacing was a little off. I wanted the edge of the card to really hug that area in the middle a little bit more. So I decided to take a ruler and a craft knife and just trim this card down. So it's going to be an unusual size. I think it ended up being about 5 inches wide by, I think, about 4.5 inches tall, somewhere around there. And it will still fit inside a regular 5x7 envelope. It'll just be a little bit smaller. So there is my second finished card. So for the third card, I'm going to go back and revisit that stamped stripe piece. And I'm going to do a little bit more stamping to finish off this card. Starting out by taking the Get Well Soon and also this other smaller grating and stamping that and heat embossing it. So once again, I'm prepping that area with an anti-static powder tool and then stamping in Versamark ink. These are 2 gratings that are also in the Healing Hug stamp set. I then used some Bruce Monroe Alabaster embossing powder and sprinkled that on. I tapped off the excess and then used a heat tool to heat and melt and smooth out all of that embossing powder. I then decided it would be fun to take some flowers from the Look for the Rainbow stamp set from Simon. This is a card kit stamp set from August 2019, or I think September 2019. And I'm going to put the flowers behind the stamped greeting area that I stamped before. I'm going to have that over the top. So I want to have the flowers in the bottom left and top right corners of this white card base. So I stamped the flowers in Onyx Black VersaFine ink and walked my fingertips over those stamps to get a really good impression. And then I grabbed some foam tape and placed that on the back of my grading area and then directly on to the front of the card. Now it's time to finish the fourth and final card, and this one works up super fast and easy with just some die cutting. So I'm going to take the other pieces that are included in that coordinating die set. I'm using the shadow and the large heart with vellum, and then the words and the smaller heart with black cardstock. I'll run that through my die cutting machine, and then I assembled them. I put some Gina K Connect glue behind the black pieces, and then adhered them to the vellum pieces with some tweezers. And I like using Connect glue because it's a liquid glue, so you have a little bit of wiggle room. I then cut some very thin stripes out of that same black cardstock, using some Licorice Twist cardstock from Basil, by the way. And then I put some of that same glue on the back of the stripes and then directly onto my striped background. So this is just going to give a little bit of a graphic element near the bottom, and it also closes up the really large area of the striped piece so that when I adhere the healing hugs and the heart, it doesn't look like it's too small for the area. Now I'm using a different Xyron Create a Sticker machine. Before I use that really big one, which is the Create a Station Lite, and this is actually a smaller one called just a Create a Sticker machine. And it does the same exact thing, but it's meant for smaller pieces. So I put that adhesive on the back of these vellum pieces, and I really used my fingers to flatten out that area, make sure the adhesive was completely adhered. And then I use my tweezers to position die cuts on top of my striped panel. And I put that heart off to the side. The last thing to do was to put some foam adhesive on the back of this striped piece. And then I used a T-square ruler to help me get this positioned on a 5x7 card base just perfectly. So here are all 4 cards, 4 different ways to not only create stripes on your cards, but also some ideas on how you can use those striped backgrounds on your cards with some heat embossing, vellum die cuts, adding stripes, and also stamping behind some stripes. Hope you guys enjoyed today's card video, actually, 4 cards. This new stamp set and die set are available over at SimusStamp.com. It's part of their Stamptember release, so it's a great time to pick up some new stamps. Thank you so much for watching today. If you are new to my YouTube channel, please subscribe and hit that notification bell and hit that like button. Let me know you liked this video so I can create even more. Thank you so much for watching today. I will be back very soon with another card video.